Mortgage on its face is very complicated, but it shouldn't be to the customer.
You have two different companies today. Tell us about the different companies, why they're important to you, and what you do.
How do I reach them before they get to me, right? Like, how do I help educate them in another way? And I was putting out all this information on Facebook. I do all kinds of reels and stuff, and I have a YouTube channel, all these things.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Quantum Revenue Expansion, where we talk about turning your annual revenue into your monthly revenue. And speaking of revenue and money, I have a very special guest here today. The very amazing Jacqueline Crider is here. Jax, good morning.
Good morning, Ursula. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well.
Jax is joining me directly all the way across the United States at the bottom of this country. I'm at the top in Minnesota. She's at the bottom for our international clients in Texas, which, now that we put it out there, I mean, I'm not even sure Texas is a state anymore. Are you your own country yet? Just checking in.
Pretty much. We pretty much think we're our own country, whether you believe that or not. But that is definitely how Texans roll. We believe that we are our own little country, and we pretty much are.
I just read an article about how Europeans can spot Americans right away. And it's because we introduce people by telling them the state we're from. It's not like we're like, oh, we're from the United States. We're like, I'm from Minnesota, as if everyone should know exactly where that is. So
I will say that most Europeans actually do know where Texas is, although they have a misconceived notion that we like ride horses to school or something. We don't. We drive cars and we do have electricity. So It's not like good old cowboy central over here, unless you're talking about the football team, in which case Dallas is very sold out.
See, all the things, right? Texas really needs to be its own country. I mean, in all fairness, I think people do know where Texas is. Minnesota, probably they're like, is that up north? Like, no one really cares. But Texas is, Texas is Texas. Well, I'm excited to have you here. You've never been on the show. This first time. Yeah. And today we're going to talk about financial conversations simplified, how to afford the life of your dreams, which... there's a lot. There's going to be a lot that we're going to unpack today, and I'm excited to have that conversation. Jax, let me tell you about Jax. She has over 20 years experience in the financial services space. And the one thing Jax has found to be most important in educating is educating through the process of simplification, simplifying everything. Out of this vein, her businesses were born. PB&J Mortgage's goal is to make the mortgage process simple, and House U is much the same, giving consumers good information while simplifying the process. I feel like you have so much to give. Like so many of the guests that come here and so many of our clients, you have so much to give to your clients, the people in your space. To me, you're like you're like an energizer bunny, Jax. Like when I think of you, I think you have so much energy. Are you a generator on the human design?
I'm pure generator.
Yeah, for our human design folks out there who know all the things, Jax is a generator. I'm a projector. So generators and projectors together. Everybody in my team's a generator. So when I get with generators, we have fast conversations. They're exciting because I feed through all of your energy. So I was very much looking forward to this conversation today. So Jax, let's start at the beginning. I always ask this, what in the heck brought you into the business world? Because we all know there's easier things we could be doing. Let's face it. There's JOBs that people would give us, we're great team members. There's so many other things we could be doing. And instead we've said yes to this entrepreneurial journey. So tell us about yours and welcome to the show.
So if you roll all the way back, everyone thought I was going to be a teacher. Like that's literally what
I can totally see that. That's what you do as well.
That is what everybody thought. They were like, oh, Jack's on a Sunday, kindergarten Sunday school class, all 4 years of high school. She was a tutor. She babysat all the time, blah, blah, blah. She's totally going to be a teacher. And it's funny because the reason I decided not to be a teacher is because the high school that I went to, we actually had to go into an inner city school. It was every other Wednesday, and we spent a half day there, and we helped the teachers do anything they could. And those teachers were like beat the heck down. I mean, you could just see it. It was just, they were just worn out. And I was like, I want to be teaching people who want to engage with me, who want to learn, right? And so I kind of made this transition and fell into mortgage kind of on accident. And I sort of realized that it was like a teaching ground, but in a very different sense. Like as opposed to teaching children, I'm teaching kind of adults, right? And also in a way that makes sense because mortgage on its face is very complicated, but it shouldn't be to the customer. And so after going through all kinds of mortgage companies and working for huge companies and small companies and everywhere in between, I just couldn't really educate in the way that I wanted to and reach clients in the way that I wanted to. And I come from a huge entrepreneurial family. So my mom has owned her own business since I was maybe two, something like
Wow.
that. My uncle at one point owned 30 some odd companies. So my oma and my opa, which is my mom's parents, they both owned their own company. My opa was a locksmith, my oma was a dog groomer, and then you have on my dad's side, my grandmother was a hairdresser. So I guess
Hmm.
my family had always been in the entrepreneurial space, so I wasn't afraid to bet on myself.
Yeah.
And I also was able to control the narrative a little bit more of like how I could interact with the customer and make sure that they were actually getting what I felt like was most important and not just what everyone in my space felt was most important, right? Because I don't feel like a lot of times in the last 10 or 15 years, people have really educated well in my space.
I know.
And that's upsetting to me.
I have a story for you. I'm going to share. I've been saving it. I've been saving it for the show. We'll get there. So tell us about, you have two different companies today. Tell us about the different companies, why they're important to you, and what you do.
Right. So PBJ Mortgage is a mortgage company. Basically, what we do is we have, clients no matter where they're kind of in their stage, whether they're first timers, they've done it a lot of times, and they come to us and we try to take all the information they provide us, ask really good questions, and sort of simplify it down. So as opposed to you have to know everything and you have to know exactly what kind of products you want and all these different things, we simplify it down. We give you a couple of really good, solid choices out of like what you've given us, and then we present those to you and let you know, hey, this based on what you gave us and what you told us is your goals, what you want to look to do, where you're at, etc., are the best choices. And sometimes it's different than what they think. They come in with this idea that this is what it's going to be, and then once we've drilled it down, it's actually this is the better choice for them. And so that's kind of what we do there. House U was sort of born out of the fact that a lot of people were afraid to have conversations with us. So I tell people all the time, please use me as a resource. Like, I promise we're not going to tell you you're stupid or that your questions are dumb. But for whatever reason, people either think that one, they have to pay to speak to us, which is not true. It's completely free of charge. Or two, they're afraid that what we're going to give them is like we're going to tell them no, or that they suck, or that their credit sucks, or something like this, which again is not true, but that's what they have in their head. So I was like, okay, how do I reach them before they get to me, right? Like, how do
Yeah.
I help educate them in another way? And I was putting out all this information on Facebook. I do all kinds of reels and stuff, and I have a YouTube channel, all these things. But I created House U to sort of lay out the big rocks, if you will, of buying a house. The objective of that company was, okay, so if I lay out the big rocks, then if you don't utilize me or you go with a professional that doesn't know what they're talking about, at least now some bells should be going off in your head if something is wrong, if they
Yeah.
didn't do it right. And for me, that was the biggest thing, is that I get it. I can't help everybody, even though I'd like to, but at least if I can give you good information so that you can make a good choice, or when something is wrong. Because the problem is a lot of times people don't know something's wrong until it's way too late. And now they're stuck.
Right.
And I don't want them to
So
be stuck like that, I guess.
what are some of the things that could be wrong that they might not know about?
So a lot of times they don't understand that the person they're speaking to doesn't understand the mortgage space. And this doesn't necessarily have to do with how long they've been doing it. It has to do with who backs them. That's part of it, right? So like, do they have good resources? And then how much are they dedicated to being a true professional? How much do they understand? So like, for instance, just to be real, I don't know everything about my space. And why do I say that? Because the information changes daily. And not only that, but the information, the mortgage space could fill up this entire room I'm sitting in. Like, it's so many guidelines, it's so many products, it's so many things. Like, there's a lot, right? So when you're picking a professional, most people have it in their mind that rate is the only thing that matters. And I'm not saying it's not important. It is, but it's just not the only thing that matters. And when you're talking to a professional, if you tell them, oh, this is what I want, as a consumer, I'm sorry, but you don't necessarily know that that's the truth. You think that that's what you want, maybe because you saw a video or you saw whatever, but the professional should be drilling it down and determining if that is what is best for you. So they won't necessarily know that. There's unfortunately a lot of realtors, and because you and your husband used to be in that space, they're not in it and they don't educate the consumer like about how they could lose their money, right? So
Right.
they're putting down money when they first, get under contract to buy a house, and there's certain things that they can get out on, right, and get the money back, and there's certain things they can't. But they don't really explain this very well. So I've had a lot of times we've had to come in at the 11th hour and save deals. We typically can save them as long as they're savable, but sometimes
Yeah.
we can't, and they've lost money. They've lost a fair bit of earnest money in that process. And that's really frustrating for me because a lot of times they just didn't know. I mean, maybe they would have still made the same decisions, and that's fair, but maybe they
Yeah.
wouldn't have.
Yeah. So much to unpack there that in what you're saying is, well, here's the truth. How could any of us be educated on mortgage, right? It's not like we teach it in school. It's like this sort of secondary thing. And yet like this kind of like, in fact, we don't even talk about it in families for the most part. And it just it becomes a thing when all of a sudden one day you decide you want to buy a house. And
So I joke all the time that in my space, we are not the sexy part of the transaction. We are the boring part. We are super needed, but we are not wanted. Like, you don't wake up in the morning and say to yourself, "Man, you know what I want to do today? I want to borrow $500,000." But what you do say to yourself is, "I want to buy a house." You don't have the $500,000 in your bank, or maybe you're doing something with the $500,000, right? You're investing it or whatever. So then I become the necessary evil of the transaction. And so it's this big debt, and it's an important thing. But unfortunately, people feel like all mortgages are created equal. And I learned something interesting not horribly long ago that I thought was really odd, but it's true. Most people think that buying a house and buying a car are really similar, like the financial processes are very similar. And what most people realize is there's very few product types on car loans. Like, pretty much the only thing that can change is like the rate and the
right.
actual term.
Great point. Yeah.
But on mortgages, it's way more complicated than that.
So much.
Like, the term, the product type, how much money you're putting down, do you want an adjustable rate versus a fixed rate mortgage? Like there's so many things. So
Yeah.
people have in their mind like, "Oh, well, it's just the rate. That's all I need to worry about." Well, not necessarily, because
No.
there's so many more implications that come along with it, and they just don't think about it. Because to be true, like you said, you don't do it all the time. You're not taught about it. So why would you know that?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, real estate can be one of the things that creates wealth for a lot of families. I was just reading an article yesterday about a family in Coronado, California, who, I don't know, like in the early 1900s, had the opportunity to rent first and then purchase this property.
Like rent
And
to own.
I mean, they didn't pay very much for it then, right? Years later, it's now, they put there was like a tenant house or something on it, and they turned that into like an apartment complex. Today it's worth like $5 million or something. And they're donating a whole bunch of their money because they realize that someone gave them the opportunity to buy the property. And I was also thinking about our conversation today, and someone helped them figure out the financial side of it, right? Because for you, what you do, yes, you're on the mortgage end. It's not the sexiest side, but I will say it is the side where I've gotten both the worst advice, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment, and the best advice. And we have someone like that, had in the past, and especially in California, when we were buying a lot of real estate, who really, who took the time to teach us, which is what you do. And because of that, we have built a lot of wealth in real estate. We lost a lot of wealth in the Great Recession of California. I will say that, like, we watched it all go, like a lot of people did. We got back in the game. We got back in the game. In fact, we qualified a few years later as first-time home buyers, but that's a whole other conversation. But we wouldn't have known that if we weren't educated by someone in the mortgage industry. I mean, that was one of the happiest days of my life. I was like, what? I can buy a house for 3%? What? Anyway, I digress. I love real estate, so it's a fun conversation. Years ago, we bought our first house, Jax. Tim and I are super excited. We're like, how old were we? We were in our 20s, kind of later 20s. And we don't come from a lot of wealth. So this was a big deal. We had saved the money ourselves. And it was a big deal. And buying in California, even then, was not inexpensive. And people were like,
No.
"You're going to pay how much for a 4-bedroom house?" I mean,
Oh,
it was
yeah.
only like $230,000, but for us, it felt like, 10 million.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so we're going through the process, and I'm in networking groups. That's how I met the mortgage provider and the real estate person. The deal is supposed to be done in 1 week. Okay. We're close. Like everything seems like we think everything's fine. As we get closer, we realize there's something kind of off. And the mortgage person, I remember his first name was Brent. He's not in the industry anymore. He called us and he's like, "Listen, we need like $6,000 more. Now, you know
Sure,
what
you
I'm
can pull
getting at
that out of the
here.
hat. No problem.
How would we know, right? We just happen to mention that though to somebody who's like, oh no, 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 no. You need to talk to my mortgage person. So that's when we met a guy called Patrick. I don't even know if Patrick's still in business, years ago. And Patrick's like, that money, like, that's a shady deal. That money's going directly in his pocket and you just don't even know. I was like, how is that even possible? Like, what? I don't get it.
Yeah,
And I totally
this is
get like,
pre all the crazy regulations they put in place.
exactly. It was pre that.
Uh,
And he goes, I can get this deal done in a week. This is what you were talking about. Like sometimes you can come in at the 11th hour and figure it out. And Patrick figured it out for us. We didn't have to pay an extra $6,000. We got our first house and we celebrated. And so I'm just saying, celebrating you as the amazing mortgage people are out in the world who are super honest and who are taking the time to educate, whether it's first time or second time home buyers or whatever it is, and to make a difference. Because without Patrick, I don't know that we would have even gotten our first house. Like our lives would have been dramatically different. And so tell us a little bit, like through House You, like what do you wish people knew about buying, a house, or even being able to afford, or being in the mindset of what I can afford? Because I was talking to a family member recently who's younger, and they're just in that, they're just figuring out now that this is a dream for them as well, that they're going to be able to buy that first condo. And we were showing them, but they had no idea. So here's your platform. What do you wish people knew? Here you go.
okay. That's a really good question. So I think the biggest thing is that you're right. So mortgage, well, owning a home, it's the single biggest wealth differentiator there is. Actually, between myself and my brother, yes, we're 4 years apart, but if you like look and you track when I bought a house versus when my brother bought a house, it was basically 4 years apart in age, in actual age. And part of the reason that I have a significant portion more wealth than him is because I owned a house 4 years earlier than him. So I always tell people that I understand sometimes it is a sacrifice, but it is one worth having. And a lot of people just don't understand that. They don't realize that they sometimes might have to sacrifice a little bit to get where they are, or they feel like it's impossible. Oh, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to own a home. People have a misconception that they need a ton of money to be able to buy a house. There's lots of different options. Like you said, most of the standard programs is 3 or 3.5% down. And then there's even some ones that are 0% down. And then they're just dealing with like closing costs, right? Just depending. So a lot of people get it in their head that they can't do it. Let the professional tell you what that looks like. Don't just assume that that's the case for you, because the truth of the matter is a lot more people qualify than not. And most of us, if we're any good, we're not going to force you to do something you don't want to do. So if I have a customer who, like, if I honestly feel like it's going to strap them or it's going to put them in a position where they're just really, really uncomfortable, I will have a conversation and I'll ask them, okay, so are you good with this? Are you comfortable with this decision that you're making? Do we want to back it down a little bit on the price amount, right? Like, is that something that we want to do? Because I don't want to put them in a position where, okay, they're not going to be able to do the things that they love.
Right.
That's not something that we're looking to do either. The general rule of thumb, as far as the math goes, is however much you make gross. Now, this is not for the entrepreneurs who take out a bunch of money in taxes, okay? Like you and I, that's a little bit different. But if you're a regular wage earner, then typically it's whatever you make gross, you and whoever else you're going to qualify with, which is another thing people don't realize. They could qualify with people other than just a spouse. It could be a best friend. It could be, a sibling, a parent, all kinds of things, right? We've done loans for all kinds of weird combinations of people. It's usually between 3 and 5 times that amount of what they can qualify for on average. Okay, that's the general gist.
Say that again. So let's use a real world example, like in Texas.
So you make $100,000. If you make $100,000 gross, right? Just because that's really easy math. If we multiply that by 3, you should be able to afford between a $300,000 and a $500,000 house, roughly. Now, obviously, this depends. If you're drowning in debt, then that may not necessarily be the case. But that's another thing that a mortgage professionals are really good at. We know a lot of people in the financial space. We've had to navigate a lot of things. So we know how to help you kind of manipulate credit. That's something that we're usually pretty good at. If you need to like consolidate some debt into some kind of a loan, we usually know somebody to direct you to help you with that process. So people obviously, like, I swear it never fails. They come to us when they have found the house. And I'm like, you're doing it backwards. come to us
Mm,
first, have a conversation
yeah.
with us first, even if it's like 6 months or a year out, we can still look at it and kind of help you lay out like the thought process, the plan, and then just come back when you're ready. But you put us in a box when you've already found the house because now we're going to have less choices for you.
Yeah. It's a little
Time cures
late.
all else
Yeah,
in our space.
so you bring up a lot of great points. It's like really for people to meet with professionals, educate. I know when we were going through the Great Recession and had to kind of figure out what we're going to do with all the properties and just moving things around, our mortgage person connected us with someone because we were like, do we have to file bankruptcy? We looked into that option.
Yeah.
It didn't work for us based on other incomes that were coming in, but we were able to negotiate with investors and we just got really good advice. And so leaning into for all of us, right? This goes to Dan Sullivan's book, Who Not How, which I know you love as well. It's like,
Yes.
who are the who's like, Jax and other professionals who can help you make these decisions. If I don't know something, it's like, all right, who knows this, right? Who can help me? So,
Well, and
and
a lot of people don't realize, like, for instance, like, so I'm a nerd. I have a law degree. So I have all these connections with like lawyers and stuff like that. So to your point, if somebody needed to consider bankruptcy or they needed to consider, like, unfortunately, they're getting ready to go through a divorce, like, a lot of times they don't realize that we can help facilitate some of those conversations. You know what I mean? Give good advice of who to connect to. And if I don't know anybody, my network is big enough. I promise somebody
right.
I know knows somebody that I can, and I will absolutely be happy to make those connections for people. But a lot of people just don't realize that, right? So they're struggling to figure this out. And I'm like, you're making this way too hard. Like,
Mhm.
you literally can come and we'll give you the information for free,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah.
We don't charge anything.
No, so much information that you can share, and you can work with people in all 50 states, which we'll talk about in a moment. Before we get there, though, just a couple things. So you have a law degree, so the teaching thing went by the side, but you're still so you have a law degree. You're doing all these things. You're in business. Law degrees are great because it's easy to read contracts. I was in law school for 5 minutes, but I took the contracts class, and it's served me well ever since. And then I escaped. But uh, what other? I'm just this question's just dropping in. What other business lessons? Like you have a lot of interesting business experience. You're in the mortgage industry, which has been, we know, interesting is like an
A
understatement
roller
kind of word for the
coaster.
last bit. And you're still going strong. Like when I think of you, Jax, like you're scrappy, like you figure it out, like and you empower yourself to figure it out. What are some of the biggest business lessons you've learned like in the past 10 years?
So most of them probably have come in the last 2
So the last
because
two
I will
years.
say that a lot of times when you're crazy busy, like what we were in 2020 and all the space or whatever, because you're just moving so fast because you're trying to help everybody you can help and all the things, right? So it's like when things slow down, you have a minute to sit and kind of put a magnifying glass on your business and say, "Oh, huh, that might need a little bit of help." But honestly, I will say, and you mentioned the book, like Who Not How, it sort of made me realize that I think as business owners, we try to control so many things that the truth of the matter is all we really can control is ourselves. And so we should be looking for those who's that can help us, right? And yeah, sometimes it's a little scary because there is a possibility they're going to drop the ball, right? But the reality is if you don't ever take any chance and you don't ever put yourself out there and you don't ever try to do something to move forward, you're never going to be where you want to be. I mean, just like home ownership, like it is. Like I've had conversations with people, actually in the Gen Zers, and one of them said the reason that it's scary to own a home is it doesn't provide stability, and I thought that was a weird comment.
Hmm.
I was like, can you explain that? Because to me, owning a home is stability, right? Like it means that I have somewhere that I get to go, and my payment is more or less the same, right? It's not doing crazy things or
Right.
whatever.
You're in control of it. It's yours.
Correct, and then to me, that's what stability stands for, but what she said was really interesting. She said, "Well, it doesn't allow me to do some of the things that I'm used to doing all the time, like the creature comforts, because 'cause she'd have to
Hmm.
cut some of those back out to be able to sacrifice to own a home," is what she meant, and it
Interesting.
was kind of an interesting play to me. Like I was like, "Huh, that's an interesting way to look at that at stability." But the challenge is that if you always are living in a stable world and you always have everything be so even keel, like, are you really going to level up? Like to your point, like, are you ever going to reach like that quantum, leap? Like, are you ever going to make that? I mean, probably not.
No.
And safety is not gonna help you. And here's the thing: you can either move and make the moves yourself and be in control of the moves you're gonna make, or something else will. The universe will push you there. So
Yeah.
I rather
So
make the choice
important.
myself to make the leap.
That's okay.
Just the same. I mean, just because,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm kind of a control freak. Like I like so that's why I didn't do who not how for a long time because I was like, I have to figure it out. Like I'm scrappy. Like I'm smart. I can figure this out. Like I'll get there. And then I was like, but you can't. Like you're one
Yeah.
person. If you want to help all the people you want to help, if you want to do all the things you want to do, like you can't. And so that meant
Right.
taking a flyer on people who could totally hose me. And to be real, like that has not always gone according to plan. There has been some people that haven't been perfectly honest or forthright or whatever, or maybe they were, but we were misaligned on like our communication. So I thought it meant one thing, they thought it meant something else, which happens a lot too, right? So like you just take it as a learning experience and move on. Like what else can you do? I mean, I was
Yeah.
telling you, just so all of you viewers know, my life is a personal hot mess right now. Like between some of the stuff that I have going on, like I have this big, huge house that had a flood. Like somebody left water running for 3.5 days and it flooded a huge section of my house. So I've been like running around like a mad one and trying to do all of the things, having to trust the who's.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And it's not
It's
comfortable.
and you're almost to the end of it.
Right. I mean, but you don't like getting stretched is one of the best things for you, but it's not fun and it
It's not fun.
sucks.
Well, and what I find too with generators, like in human design, you being a generator, like it reminds me of Rebecca's a generator. Rebecca Hall, one of the coaches who's on the show a lot. Generators really muscle their way through things. Like that's one of the things I noticed. Like you guys will muscle it and muscle it and muscle it until you're like, fine, I'm too tired. Like who can fix this for me? Right? And then you're like, raise your hand.
Well, yeah,
And
because
I
you
think,
because you burn out. Like you just get to a point where you can't. There's just
but
no
that's what I've
more.
noticed about. I really noticed, Jax, that over the last, really like month and a half, I've seen you surrendering a lot more and leading a lot more in your business. Like really being like, you know what, I'm not taking all this on. And you also mentioned something really important, which we were talking about this at the CEO table this week. It's like, what's the meaning we put on something? Because with your house, I'm going to be super curious to see on the other side of it, like what end up being kind of the good things that come out of it, or the blessings, or like this wouldn't have it. And I'll give you an example. Like a friend of mine recently, she was talking about wanting a new car. And this is to your point also, that when we don't make the moves we're supposed to make, I was like, if you really want a car, go figure out your car situation, because there's something weird like with the universe, especially with cars. Like when you say you want a new car, like either that car breaks down or gets. I remember when my husband was like, I want a new car. And like I say, he's a manifesting generator. It was like, 2 hours later, he was in a car accident, had to get a new car. So since then, we're very careful about that. Both of my friends' cars, hers and her husband's, are out of commission this week. They're driving a rental car right now. And it's not, I'm not, it's, everybody's okay. My point is, when you got to make the move, when you're being pushed to make the move, it is uncomfortable. Like you said, we don't want to do it. But if we don't, we get pushed. Like you're going to be put like right now for all of our listeners, there's probably things you're being called to do in your business. Jack is being called to start a podcast. We've known this for a while. The podcast is happening. Like if she didn't do it, I just feel like it would be uncomfortable. There'd be a lot of stuff. So hopefully like this is shining through. Now, Jax, really quickly, I know we could talk all day, really quickly. You've been at the CEO table for a short amount of time. So, and working through a lot of things and, just moving your way through it. Like what has already shifted or changed, or how have you expanded since you've been at the CEO table?
I think for me, it was so important to find people who were willing to really encourage me and really willing to allow me to have a moment of like, my life sucks. It's like I'm drowning. I don't know what I'm doing. Like blah blah blah. And then to be like, okay, it's okay to feel that way, but you know that that's not true, because like I grew up in a family where it was much the opposite. Like you're fine. Like and like they didn't acknowledge, and like it's fine to acknowledge that like you're going through something and that
Yeah.
it's not perfect and that you're sort of leveling up, and then that you're trying to figure it out, and that's uncomfortable and it's gritty and it doesn't feel good. And then also just seeing other people coming in and talking into that space, right? Like
Yeah.
not just you and Rebecca, like you both have done that too, because poor them, I've emailed them in like some weird hours that they're not really working and probably, and like, oh my gosh, my life is melting down, please, what do I do? I don't know. And stuff like that, right? And then the others just stepping in and saying, hey, it's okay, I've experienced this, or giving me whatever it is, a quote or whatever that looks like, right? And it also encourages me to be the same to other people, because the reality is none of us have us figured out. I say to young people all the time, I'm like, just so you're clear, adults don't have it figured out either. Like if you're wanting to know what you want to be when you grow up, us too, we don't know. And anybody who lies and tells you they have it all figured out, I promise you they probably have less figured out than you do.
Right.
They're lying to themselves, because none of us have it figured out. Because think about it. I mean, think about how many people have changed careers, like,
Oh, yeah.
like in their 40s and 50s, right? Or whatever. Like, none of us have it figured out. So in case you're watching this thinking to yourselves, man, she has it all figured out. I do not. I am the first person to own that I do not have it all figured out. Much to the chagrin. But find your people, right? Like the CEO table are my people. They have helped, I mean, when I'm having, no joke, Tuesday morning was a hot mess. Like 14 things happened that were all crappy within like an hour and a half. I was like, oh my gosh, just get yourself to work so you could sit down and go to the CEO table thing. Like, even if you don't interact, it's fine. Just watch it. It's fine, whatever. Remember, I posted in the chat, like right before we started it, like whatever my question was, that like I'm getting pulled in all kinds of directions. And that was because that morning had been a hot mess. And I instantly felt better. Like an hour later, we had gone through all the things, and I was like, yeah, they're right. It's fine. Like I'm about to make a big breakthrough. Like just big deep breath, right? And I think the other thing is that you guys remind me of something I already know, which is nobody shows up to work to do a bad job, and just so support everybody with kindness. Because the reality is you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. Like no idea. Like I'll give you an example. So there's a group that I'm a part of, and the leaders of the group, unfortunately, sort of came at a lot of us like with acting like we weren't being professionals, and it sort of hit us in a way that really kind of offset me. I was like, excuse me, say what? Like, I am doing everything I can to pour in and to do all the things, right? And so there was another member of the group that I wondered if she felt the same as me. So for sanity check reasons, I went ahead and reached out to her and I said, hey, what they didn't know is her niece has been in the hospital for over 6 months and is in a coma. Her brother had to go into the dad of the niece had to go into the hospital for, I can't remember, some odd reason. And then her mom was having a problem, and she had some major dental issue that she was having to do dental surgery on, all in that window of time.
Yeah.
So when they were coming at her, acting like she wasn't a professional and all these things, right? Like kind of in a very veiled way, like they didn't realize that she had a lot going on in the back end, right? And what they should have done is like, hey, how can we help? Like if you come from a place of help, a lot of times you're going to find that people have stuff going on and they'll share with you, or they'll show you how they need help. And they also will create a loyalty in them. Because the truth of the matter is we all have crap going on in our lives, stuff behind the scenes. And some people are more honest about it than others. Like, I'll just tell you, it is what it is. Like, you're just going to know, good or bad.
About you. Yeah. Well, here's the beautiful part, right? Like when you are vulnerable, you give other people permission to be vulnerable and be themselves. And to also bring this full circle, to also realize that we do not have to be perfect or have perfect freaking businesses to be in business, especially as women business owners. Like there's such a myth out there. Like I'm just going to say this because it drives me crazy, that we have to have it all together, or our personal life has to be perfect to have our professional life. There's no perfection. And our job, Jax, as you know, is to get up every day, like you said earlier, put one foot in front of the other, because that's all we can do, and do the best that we can do that day. That's all everybody is doing. And let go of the expectations and the pressure we put on ourselves that it has to be perfect, because like business is messy. Let's just let it be messy. So I want to make sure we have time.
The book, The 4 Agreements?
Yes. Nothing's personal.
Yeah, because I mean, it talks about like basically show up every day in the best version of you, and like it's not going to be the same every day. Like the best version of you one day when you haven't had any sleep, or something is going awry, or the coffee machine is broken, or whatever it is, right? In your personal space is not going to be as good as maybe the next day where you got great sleep and everything's going lovely, but you still just show up as the best version of you every day.
Yeah. Show up as the best version of you every day. That's a perfect place to start to wrap up, but we still have a few things that I want to make sure we talk about. You are able to help people in all 50 states. not around the world yet. Different. It's so interesting. This is a shout out to my friend Louisa, who's been on the show. She lives in the UK. She's selling her home right now. And Jax, you probably know this. I didn't know this. She was telling me, I was telling her how my mom sold a cabin for an all cash deal. It was amazing. Sold her cabin, all cash deal, and it closed in 14 days. And my friend was like, what do you mean 14 days? Like, that's unheard of, right? So in the UK, for our international folks, at least in Europe, selling a home can take 4 to 6 months. Like, there's a lot of dancing
Time
that happens.
windows,
Yeah.
Well, even
Whereas
in the
here,
US, so like
yeah,
New York is a much longer process. It's usually like a 60-day window at least when you're buying a house. And that
yeah,
just has to do with the fact that they're an attorney state, and so
regulations.
there's a lot of attorneys and stuff who have to be involved. And so there's a little bit more paperwork. It's a little more paperwork intensive and labor intensive, and so it just depends.
Yeah,
I mean, I've
it's
whipped out a
crazy.
loan in a week, and then we've had
I,
other ones that have lasted a long time.
I love a fast close myself. I was horrified to hear about. So my friends in Europe, I guess if that's what you're used to, it's different. But for here, in the US, I guess we're always like, we gotta get it done now. My mom, 14 days cash offer. I was like, oh, that's the best. So you can help people. So if someone reaches out to you, and we're gonna have this in the show notes, what are you offering them? Like if they want to work with
Yes.
you on the mortgage side.
So we will give them a $500 credit at closing or after closing for basically their appraisal. It won't necessarily cover 100% of it. Depends on the area. $500 is a general gist. They usually run somewhere between $500 and $900. But basically, that just allows them to not have to deal with that. And then we do not have lender fees, so we will not charge them any lender fees. They just need to make sure that they mention that they saw me on Quantum Revenue.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a fantastic offer for anyone who's out there. And I just want to say, with Jax, like how she is how she is. She's amazing. She'll be direct. She'll answer your questions. And I think what's easy about, like, I feel like Jax people already feel like they know you, like you, and trust you because they're connecting with you here, and they feel like they could ask you any question they wanted to, and they wouldn't be judged. So you create a safe space. The last thing we didn't talk about is our dachshunds, our wiener dogs.
Oh yeah.
So tell us about the name of your company.
See,
there's your cute
tattoo of it.
Who is that one of your dachshunds?
Schnitzel. So she was the dachshund that I was the closest to. So Pickle is the one who started the whole thing. I had her when I was first married to my ex-husband, and then she was so like lonely that I was like, okay, I feel like I need to get another one. So I ended up getting Schnitzel. Well, it was really funny because Schnitzel like liked Pickle, but like she thought she was a human, not really a dog. So she tolerated dogs, so she really thought that she was a human, and she was like my best friend. In 2020, when the pandemic was like a full like blast, and I went through a miscarriage, it was like a very rough period of time in my life. Like literally, that dog did so much for me, and she passed away the week after I had my DNC from my miscarriage. And I know for a fact that dog like held on for me, like she knew that I needed her, and then she said goodbye, and I had to put her down, unfortunately. But the mascots for PBJ Mortgage are Peanut Butter and Jelly, the Dachshund sisters. If you ever go to my website, or you'll see them because they're all over the place. Like on YouTube, like there's a picture of me and the two of them. But I like dachshunds. They're funny personalities. They're very independent, kind of like me, I guess.
Do you find that they favor one person?
Oh, they're very, so I fostered a lot of dachshunds over the course of time, and they majorly favor one sex versus another usually, and they usually have a person, like a person that is like their person. So like Peanut Butter and Jelly, I wasn't quite sure because I got them as sisters, at the same time. It was the first time I ever had a pair at one time, and I thought for sure that Jelly was kind of going to be like my Schnitzel replacement, if you will, and she was going to be really close to me, but it's Peanut Butter. Peanut Butter is like always right there. Like, in fact, I'm surprised she's not in the office right now. Usually she's like either in my lap or like off to the side. Jelly has adopted my 2-year-old. So like that is her person. And anytime Cat is around her, Jelly is all up in her business, like kissing on her face. I'm like, Jelly, stop kissing Cat's face. But it doesn't matter. Like that is Jelly's baby.
I love it.
And you're not going to convince her otherwise.
So it's interesting. So we only have Bella, our dachshund, our little mini dachshund Bella. And I never knew I wanted a wiener dog until we got Bella. Like now I could, like, she's so amazing, but she's amazing because I'm her person. So my husband, Funny story. My husband trained Bella, like slept with her at night when she was like trained her like she was a Rottweiler. Okay. So she is the best trained dachshund I've ever met in my existence. So, Tim trained her, all the things. And, she loves Tim and she loves Luca. But if I am in the room, like Tim will be snuggling with Bella on the couch. I'll come and sit in a chair like across the room, hops down, comes over, and Tim's like, really, Bella? So much so that he's been like, we're getting another wiener dog. And I'm like, well, what if they like me? I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, they're the best. Just a shout
They
out.
are. They're so good. I love. Well, and good for him for training them because they are notoriously difficult to potty train, especially when it's raining or it's cold.
We still experience. We do have to say, keep going, Bella. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Or it's like right outside the house, especially when there's snow. Jax,
yeah.
can hang out.
You know what Schnitzel would do? She knew that she would get a treat if she went to the bathroom outside. So what she would do is she would go onto the porch, she would turn her butt around and back up, drop just her back two paws off the porch, and then squat to pee, and then come back onto the porch. And I was like, really? But in fairness, you're right. It was the grass, so I can't get mad at you. It's fine.
Smart little dogs.
Yes.
All right, Jacqueline Crider. Awesome hanging out with you here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And by the time this launches, if your podcast is out, we will put it in the show notes so everyone can watch for that and connect with you there.
We're pretty sure it's going to be called Financial Mastery Simplified. Because the way I like to do everything is drilling it down to a way that you don't feel stupid when you have to understand it.
So we will put that in, just let us know. We'll put that in the show notes as well. So thank you for being here. And we love having you at the CEO table. Thanks for all the energy you bring. And we wish that this would be your best year times a million.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And our listeners all over the world, thanks for hanging out with us today. I hope you're walking away with some great thoughts on really building your own financial dream and what's possible for you. And you're inspired by Jax's story. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you soon.